Hi, everybody. So this is lecture 14, World War I and its aftermath, okay? World War I and its aftermath. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this World War I and its aftermath in 4 parts. The origin of World War I, professionals and conscription during World War I, and then World War I, optimism to pessimism. World War I is going to have a drastic effect on the outlook of Western Europeans, okay? And you're going to see the reasons why, okay? So let's get started. And let's begin with a little review. So remember, what is feminism? What is feminism, okay? So it's the promotion of equality. Women want equal rights and equal access to opportunities as men. That's what feminism is. However, there's as you've read, there's definitely pushback from a lot of sources against women wanting and first wave feminism focuses on suffrage, obtaining the right to vote. Okay, so suffragette is synonymous with feminist from the late 1800s to the early 1900s. Okay, so those are synonyms, suffragette, and think of this stereotype and how it's endured until today. Look at the cartoon, nobody loves me, guess I'll be a suffragette. This idea that many men have, and perhaps some women as well, that the feminist women are only feminist because nobody loves them. Okay, so think about that enduring stereotype. That stereotype was around in the early 1900s toward the suffragettes. And again, suffragette in the early 1900s is a synonym for feminist. Okay, so pay attention to that. Contrast with what the book authors wrote. Now, let's talk about the origins of World War I. Okay, so you're going to have 4 interlocking factors that are going to lead to World War I. Okay, this war that is going to affect the whole world because the countries involved in this war, through their colonies, control large parts of Africa and Asia. Okay, and many of those many peoples from Africa and Asia will fight in World War I in different theaters of operation. All right. So these are the factors: the destabilizing impact of Eastern European nationalism. Remember, we've talked about race and the concept of race. It's different depending on where you are at. Okay. And in Eastern Europe, you're going to see how you have Slavic peoples, you have Germanic peoples, you have Magyars, also known as Hungarians today. Okay. And in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Slavs don't have enough of a say in the direction of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, despite being a majority in different parts. They just don't have as much of a say as the Magyars do, or as the Germanic peoples of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Number 2, the creation of rival alliances. And again, I hate to keep harping on it, but the concept of race. You're going to have Serbian peoples within the Austro-Hungarian Empire that are Slavic. They're going to make an alliance with Russians because they see themselves as having a common Slavic ancestry. And for those countries, for the people in those countries, Slavic ancestry it's a type of race for them. Their concept of race is different than the concept in the U.S., which is more based on skin tone. All right? So Slavic peoples, again, these rival alliances, Russia will support some Slavic peoples of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and Germany will support the Austro-Hungarian Empire because it has a sizable Germanic majority. Okay? Remember, Austro-Hungarian Empire, you have 2 ruling majorities: Germanic peoples in the Austro-Hungarian Empire and Magyars. Those are the 2 ruling peoples. And then you have a large number of Slavic peoples, but they don't have as much power as the first 2. So these rival alliances, again, will lead to World War I. Okay? And Russia will have an alliance with France. And the reason for their alliance is not so much racial, but they're both enemies of Germany. And Russia on the east, France on the west can catch Germany in a pincer movement, like this, okay? So their alliance is more practical. They have a mutual enemy, Germany. So France and Russia, mutual enemy, Germany, all right? So now the realities of industrialized military. These different countries are industrialized, these different nation states. Great Britain, France, Germany, Austro-Hungary, Italy, and Russia not as much, but they do have a certain amount of industrialization. I guess you can consider Russia to be semi-industrialized, maybe a little bit more than semi-industrialized, but not at the same level. All right? So the realities of industrialized warfare is that people need time to transition from a regular economy to a wartime economy. So once they start transitioning, it's difficult to stop it. Factory owners will lose a lot of money if they stop this, the movement to war. Okay, and that also includes equipping your armies and using conscription, which I'll talk about. Okay, so conscription is probably connected both to 3 and 4. For the will to war, mass media, politicians will use mass media to unite people. They'll use propaganda outside of mass media, posters, to unite the people in supporting conflict. And once that gets started, it's really difficult to calm everybody down because of this idea of nationalism, this pride in where the people come from, this idea of the nation state and nationalism, okay? This religious-like support of the nation state. All right, so those are the 4 interlocking factors that lead to World War I. So here is the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Here is the Ottoman Empire. Both empires have sizable Slavic populations. And Serbia had gained independence recently. And you have Serbian organizations, Serbian peoples or Slavic peoples. So Russia definitely supports Serbia, okay? They're allies because of their of what they see as like their common race, their common Slavic ancestry, all right? So there are going to be troubles between the Austro-Hungarian Empire, its Slavic population, its Germanic and Magyar populations, and Serbia, okay? So pay attention to that. And in the Balkan region, which had been mostly controlled by the Ottoman Empire, you're going to have different independence movements rising up. Many of these independence movements will be supported or have been supported by European powers, which see a common history with the different peoples. The best example is Greece, which definitely gained its independence from the Ottoman Empire with Western European support, because Western Europeans saw Greece as the cradle of democracy, okay? And so different Europeans, both officially and unofficially, supported the Greeks' drive for independence. And at this point in time, the Ottoman Empire is semi-industrialized, especially when compared with England, the US, Germany, okay? And so the Ottoman Empire is losing this area. It's becoming unstable. And that definitely is going to also apply to adjacent areas controlled by the Austro-Hungarian Empire. All right, not Serbia. Serbia, they have a nation state, a Slavic nation state. So Serbians, in some cases, will support these different independence movements in the Ottoman Empire and in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Here's one organization, a Serbian-supported organization. It's known as the Black Hand, okay? Their slogan is unification or death. And they're definitely opposed to continued control by the Austro-Hungarian Empire of this region, okay? Montenegro here, all right? And the city of Sarajevo. And it just so happens that the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, he's supposed to make a tour of the city of Sarajevo. He's supposed to make a tour of the city of Sarajevo, him and his wife. And when the Black Hand discovers that, they're going to prepare different assassination attempts, okay, to kill Archduke Franz Ferdinand. And there's definitely some evidence that people within Serbia were funding and were part of the Black Hand, okay? All right, so again, this idea of nationalism is very important in the outbreak, okay? So on June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife, Sophie, they're on a car and they're traveling in the city of Sarajevo, okay? So here is their tour. This was the planned return route, okay? And the Black Hand has positions assassin here, 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 okay? And here, all right? However, these assassins miss. They fail to assassinate Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and Archduke Franz Ferdinand's motorcade ends up taking a different turn. And by luck, another member of the Black Hand was at a cafe, and he knew who Archduke Franz Ferdinand was, and he, Gabrielo Princip, ended up shooting both Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife. And this assassination is the spark that begins World War I. Okay, the assassination is the spark. However, the causes are the causes I mentioned, these four causes: the destabilizing impact of Eastern European nationalism, the creation of rival alliances, the realities of industrialized military, and the will to war. Okay, so the assassination by Gavrilo Princip of Archduke Franz Ferdinand is the spark. Okay, he's a member of the Black Hand, this nationalist organization, this Slavic nationalist group. So what happens after that is that Austro-Hungary, the government of Austro-Hungary, is going to make demands of Serbia. And Serbia, the demands are going to be so onerous, so great, that Serbia is going to feel compelled to oppose those how would you say it? Oppose those concessions. Okay, so Austro-Hungary is going to make a demand for certain concessions from Serbia, but Serbia, the government of Serbia, the politicians of Serbia, they're going to see, like, we cannot do that. If we do that, in a sense, we cease to be a nation state. We cease to be an independent country. They're asking too much of us. So Serbia is going to check with its ally, Russia, to see whether they have the support of Russia in opposing what Austro-Hungary demands. So when that happens, Austro-Hungary, I put Austro-Hungary will check with Germany, its Germanic ally. Remember, Austro-Hungary has a sizable Germanic majority, so they check with Germany, okay, to see whether Germany has their back, okay? So, and Russia has this alliance with France because they have a mutual enemy, Germany, all right? So here you have this domino effect, bam, 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 okay? So Germany, when they realized that Serbia, Russia, France have this alliance, they had a plan in place, the Schlieffen Plan, to in case they had to fight both France and Russia at the same time. And the plan is to invade France first and knock out France first before taking on Russia. And so what they have to do, though, is they have to go through Belgium, because this area between France and Germany is heavily fortified. And Switzerland is a neutral country, plus Switzerland is very mountainous. So the Germans cannot move too many troops through Switzerland, okay? And Switzerland is neutral. So they decide to incorporate this plan and go through Belgium. When they do, however, Belgium is allied with the United Kingdom, Great Britain, and so that's going to bring the British into the war. Okay? And this plan fails. The Allies are going to be able to stop the Germans here. And in Russia, you're going to have larger areas in which to fight. So the battlefields will go more back and forth. Usually in Russia, the Russian army will tend to defeat the Austro-Hungarian army, but the German army will tend to defeat the Russian army. But they're going to be going back and forth. Okay, back and forth. So Triple Entente, that's the name of France, the alliance of France, Russia, Italy, Serbia, okay, and the United Kingdom. The Central Powers, notice how they're in Central Europe. This alliance of Germany, Austro-Hungary, Bulgaria is going to join, Turkey is going to join, okay? Everybody in blue is neutral. All right, so you have this great war. And this war is also going to happen in the colonies. Not at the same scale, but you're also going to have certain fights in the colonies. And France is probably the country that brings the most colonial troops. The most troops from its colonies will fight in this great war. The United Kingdom will as well. Okay, so you're definitely going to have colonial troops. Okay, indigenous people of Africa and Asia, they're going to fight on behalf of these colonial powers. All right, remember that hierarchy. Okay, the middle group is indigenous people of Asia or Africa who adopt European customs and culture. One of the ways they can adopt European customs and culture is through the military. They'll learn how to use certain weapons like machine guns. They'll become proficient in them. In time, they're going to push for independence. They're going to lead the fight for independence in their own countries. All right? So that's the beginning of World War I. Again, 4 interlocking factors. Remember those, okay? The assassination by Gavrilo Princip of Archduke Ferdinand, Franz Ferdinand, was just a spark. You have 4 interlocking factors that led to World War I. Now, let's look at professionals and conscription in World War I. So, all the great powers except Britain had conscription. Over 85% of men of military age in France and 50% in Germany had served in the army or navy during World War I. France had the highest proportion of its population in the army. The armies of both France and Germany had more than doubled between 1870 and 1914. Okay, so look at the percentage increase in military spending as well, because when you have more men, more soldiers, you have to equip them. You have to give them uniforms, weapons, okay, vehicles. So look at what happens. Look at the size of the peacetime army, which is going to increase drastically, okay, with conscription. All right. Now, I want you guys to think about conscription. Conscription is the draft, okay? So these are types of unfree labor we've talked about: chattel slavery, domestic slavery, encomienda, indentured servitude, serfdom. Now, I want you to think about whether the military draft is a type of unfree labor, okay? So in the present, upon reaching the age of 18, men register themselves with the post office, right? They have to register themselves with the post office. Do you know why? That's not the draft. They're not being required to work. That's not the draft yet. The selective service is so that the government, the high government, has a list of all the available men that they can call on in an emergency to serve as soldiers, Marines, Navy, or Air Force. Okay? So the selective service is not the draft yet. The draft will be if we had a major war and the government decided to call on those people that they have a list of. This happened during the Vietnam War. So my question is, during the Vietnam War, was it a type of unfree labor? All these men, mostly working class men, had to serve in Vietnam. Fighting is a type of labor. Did they have a choice? They were getting paid. They are getting paid. But the key with unfree labor is that the people performing the unfree labor do not have a choice. They have to perform the type of labor required. With the draft, that means they have to serve in the Army, Marines, Navy, or Air Force. Okay? So is that a type of unfree labor? Think about that. I'll have that question as one of your discussion questions. Here is the Schlieffen Plan, going through Belgium, try to knock out Paris. Did not work. Okay? This is the French plan, go through here, invade Germany. Okay? So 1914, again, pay attention to how the European powers, different European powers, control different parts of the globe. All right? They even have a few American colonies, like France, which is usually blue. These are French colonies in Africa. United Kingdom, also known as Great Britain. British colonies in Africa. British colonies in the Middle East. India, Pakistan, parts of Afghanistan. Down here, French Indochina, French Vietnam, British Australia. Look at Netherlands. This is a very wealthy oil producing region, tropical region. So oil, rubber, two key ingredients of industrialization. All right. Let me see. Let me go to the next slide. Now, this is a mechanized war, okay? So they're going to use different tools developed in factories, like chemical warfare, different types of gases that kill, okay? Machine guns, again, they have to be produced in factories. Barbed wire, factories. Digging of trenches. Every soldier will carry a shovel because the best protection against gunpowder weapons is to dig a hole in the ground, okay? And cover yourself with the earth. All right. These are two videos about communications. So remember, it will be on the in my PDF notes. You guys can take a look at the two videos. All right. And as I mentioned, for Western Europe, you're going to have German, Austro-Hungarian armies advancing into France, and then there's going to be a stalemate of trenches. And armies will be able to advance in a year, maybe a mile or two, if that. It's going to be a stalemate because defensive weapons at this point in time are more powerful. The tank only starts being used effectively toward the end. Okay? It's not one of the most effective weapons in 1914 or 1915 or 1916. 17 and 18, they start to use it somewhat more effectively, but it's just not that effective. So the defensive preparations are more effective than offensive for World War I. However, in Eastern Europe, you have more of a back and forth because you have like a wider stretch of land. You have less obstacles. You still have more effective defensive weapons, but it's easier for armies to go back and forth because you have less obstacles. In the West, you have a larger number of obstacles. All right. If we look at here again, no, not that one. Here, again, look at this border just from here to here, and look at the large border with Russia. A lot of places to advance. All right, and you're also going to have vehicles playing a larger role in this war, okay, in time. One of the things that they use to try to prevent the stalemate, they start using primitive bombers, primitive fighter planes to knock down those bombers, okay? They even start attacking cities because the military planners, they they think that in order to knock out, they have to, in order to win the war, they start to decide to attack cities because of urbanization. Think of where all the factories are. And so military planners will start to think, well, these are military targets, these factories. They're producing machine guns here. They're producing barbed wire here. They're producing trains here. Okay? They're aiding in the war effort. We have to start to, they start to develop these bombers, bomber planes, and fighter planes to knock down those bombers. All right? And this war also occurs at sea. Okay? The British, with their great navy, they try to blockade Germany and Austria-Hungary from receiving supplies from the U.S. Or other countries, neutral countries in Latin America. All right. So now the Germans don't have as strong of a navy, so they're going to focus on the development of a new kind of ship, the submarine or U-boat, Untersee boot. Untersee boot is a German word for submarine, basically undersea boat, Untersee boot, U-boat for short. So they're going to start to use their U-boats to attack resupply convoys for British, French forces, Italian forces that are fighting the Germans here. Okay. Now, those undersea boats, those submarines, are actually going to bring the U.S. into the war. All right. Let me see. Yeah. So this submarine warfare, what ends up happening is the war in Russia becomes more and more intense, and it destabilizes the government, the Russian government. So in 1917, you're going to have a Russian Revolution, and Russia will make its own peace and will drop out of the war. So what the Germans realize is they have a window of opportunity to try to conquer France and end the war. So they launch all-out attacks on land and at sea with their U-boats. And they're going to sink boats with a large number of American citizens. They're going to send a telegram to Mexico, the Zimmerman telegram, which promises Mexico that Mexico can recover its the Southwest in California if they'll support Germany. Okay? And so these two instances will be magnified in U.S. newspapers. And this campaign, because of the Zimmerman telegram and because of submarine warfare, will coalesce U.S. sentiments behind support of the Entente powers, Great Britain, France, Italy. Okay? And the U.S. will declare war on the side of the Triple Entente. All right? So, and Germany's not able to knock out France before your U.S. troops start arriving. Okay? So, and again, U.S. is using, they have the highest conscription rate, meaning the highest number of its male population fighting the war, and they're also bringing in colonial troops, the British, the French, the Germans, the Austro-Hungarians. They're also bringing in colonial troops, people of color from Asia, from Africa, are fighting in this war. All right, in time, with the help of U.S. troops, the French, the British, the Italians will defeat the Triple Entente powers. Okay? And the different participants will send diplomats to hash out an agreement, the Treaty of Versailles, okay, which is signed on November 11th, 1918. Think about what holiday arrives around November 11th, November 10th, okay? That holiday commemorates the end of World War I, all right? Germany is required to pay these huge reparation payments because France, especially France, there's a lot of bitterness in France because they lost the most. A large part of their male population was killed or maimed in this war. So they're definitely, they're bitter and they have these very strong feelings, especially against Germany. Okay? Also in Belgium. This is where most of the fighting occurred. All right? because of World War One, we have 8.8 million Europeans dying, 12.8 million Europeans being wounded, and 4.1 million prisoners or missing persons. All right. The president of the U.S., Woodrow Wilson, he promotes the founding of the League of Nations and 14 points for peace. However, in the U.S., Congress will not sign the agreement, and the U.S. will not become part of this League of Nations, which is supposed to keep the peace. So don't confuse the League of Nations with the UN. The League of Nations is a different organization. That's going to fail between World War One and World War II. Okay? It's meant to be an organization like the UN that promotes peace, but it's definitely going to fail. And we'll see why. And I got these figures from this website. And during the Treaty of Versailles, we're going to have someone that attends, Mao Zedong. That's him right here. He attends the Treaty of Versailles. Okay? And he learns. Him and other educated indigenous people of Africa, Asia, and the Americas, they're going to learn from this war. And if they felt that that people who were classified as white were superior after this war, that's definitely going to change these attitudes. Many people didn't feel that. Many indigenous people of Africa and Asia didn't feel that. But those that did, many of their minds are going to be changed after this very devastating war, because many colonial troops fought in World War I. They saw their own fellow soldiers from their own ethnicity die, but they also saw European soldiers die. Okay? They were commanded by European officers many times, but they saw that they're human. So, again, they're gonna colonial troops in many ways are going to be empowered when they return to their colonies, and they're educated in European ways because of their service in the military, and they're going to be one of the groups that's going to push for change within, that's going to push for nationhood in their respective regions. Okay, so now this idea, optimism to pessimism, okay? So we saw how from the period of 1750 to 1914, there's growing optimism by Europeans. They gained control of the Americas. Many became entrepreneurs. Many who were poor became wealthy. And even the poor gained access to better salaries because of industrialization, because of forming labor unions and advocating for change, because of the support of labor parties, and even pressuring other parties, the conservative and liberal parties. So there was definitely an optimism by European peoples from 1750 to 1914. Okay, that's going to change due to this war. All right, it's going to change. And this optimism, in some ways, it was presented in positive ways and negative ways, as we saw. Negative ways, social Darwinism. Positive ways, feminism. The push for labor reforms within industrial factories. So again, in history, positives and negatives. All right. And again, from this war, 1914, this total war that even affects people in the cities removed from the war, because their cities begin to be bombed by bombers, okay, that start to attack factories, try to find factories to affect the ability of the war-making ability of the enemy countries, the enemy nation states, okay? And again, remember all the population, all the people who died or were casualties. Many had PTSD. Many ended up missing, were never recovered. Okay, so think about a generation lost. Okay, and it's one of the major reasons for this pessimism. It begins it begins earlier. I would say 1917 with a stalemate, 1916 with a stalemate. But it definitely rises in 1918 and beyond, this idea. All right. Living in the trenches was brutal. Men would get trench foot. I've told you I'm a former Marine, and so we were taught about trench foot. Trench foot is when France, it rains a lot. And the trenches, they're holes in the ground. So you're going to have pools of water. And when you cannot keep your feet dry, you get what's called trench foot. And pieces of your skin will just be, will fall off. And it's very painful, okay? Because you cannot keep your feet dry during the rainy season in the trenches. You're also facing gas attacks. They are going to be outlawed for World War II, but in World War I, they face gas attacks. And death from a gas attack is terrible, okay? Any kind of death is terrible, but people who get gas, they can suffer lingering effects, okay? An example of trench foot, again, consistent wetness, okay? No man's land is the area between the two armies, okay? This area is covered with barbed wire. It's difficult to advance through barbed wire, all right, while you're getting shot at, while enemy artillery shells are raining down on you. Attacking was brutal, okay? So a lot of men get post-traumatic stress disorder. And back then, it's not diagnosed. They don't understand. They might treat it as being a coward, okay? But it's not. It's just the constant stress of war just leads to PTSD among many people, many of the soldiers who fight. There's artillery. Look at all the shells. The machine gun. When you stand up, these machine guns can shoot 500 rounds a minute. Usually, they can't shoot consistently, so they'll shoot anywhere from 4 to 7 bullets at a time. And you can see the bullets impacting in front of you, okay? But you're being told to advance. How do you dodge? Who survives? Who doesn't? Again, these pressures definitely the casualties. Injuries, amputations, as well as PTSD. These are examples of colonial troops. They support the British Empire. They're from India. This is now look at these soldiers. Vietnam on the left, Vietnamese soldier, Tunisian soldier from North Africa, Senegalese soldier from West Africa, Sudanese soldier from East Africa, Russian soldier, American soldier, Portuguese soldier, British soldier from Great Britain. And again, I would say the Tunisian soldier, let me see, Vietnamese, they would have most likely supported the French army. Tunisian, French army. I went to Tunisia, French-speaking country today. I did go to Tunisia. I think it's French. Senegalese, also French-speaking. Again, supporting the French army, part of the French army. Let's see. Vietnam, Tunisia, Senegal, Sudan, East Africa. I'm not sure about the Sudanese soldier. I don't know which army he would fight. Definitely a triple entente country. I'm just not sure. But East Africa, Russian soldier, triple entente. So these are triple entente soldiers. Okay? Portuguese, British, American. In the home front, you have new people working in factories. Many men are fighting, so in some cases, you'll have women working in factories. When the men come back, do you think women will want to abandon their factory work, which pays them better than previous jobs than they had had? Okay? So in order to continue, in order to produce at a wartime level with large amounts of men fighting in World War I, you need populations, sometimes women, sometimes minority populations. They have more opportunities to better themselves on the home front during World War I. Okay? And again, these are industrial machines that allow the bombing of cities far away distant from the war. Okay? Bombing of factories. Back then, bombing with planes, shelling with warships, with battleships, was not as accurate as bombing today. So you definitely have many more casualties, civilian casualties, okay, because of these. and they lead to, again, this disillusionment. Not only are soldiers, many men dying, you also have people on the home front dying because they're being attacked. Factories are being attacked, and those bombs, those artillery shells that don't land in the factories are going to affect surrounding homes, surrounding apartment buildings. All right, so again, in the nation states of Europe, you're going to have pessimism among the majority populations of nation states because of, again, the death and maiming of men, the dissatisfaction with the peace treaty, the Treaty of Versailles. Nobody's satisfied with this treaty, not at all. The French and the Belgians, they want Germany to pay more. Germany is bankrupt. They cannot pay more, okay? They cannot pay quickly. They cannot pay reparations quickly, all right? And this is one of the works, All Quiet on the Western Front, that reflects some of this pessimism that develops as a result of World War I. Okay, you're also going to have pessimism and outrage of minority populations because, again, they serve in the armed forces, and when they serve in the armed forces, they definitely face death. They face all these the same things that majority populations face, but they do rise up in power. Some of them rise up and become small unit leaders. And again, they're part of the whole. They're supporting the home country. They see a certain equality in the trenches. Everyone is suffering. You have to fight together to fight the common enemy. But when they return back to their home countries, many of them maimed, that respect is lost as you have colonial officials disrespecting their contributions. All right. Examples are African Americans in the U.S., Irish in Ireland, Jews in Germany. Okay. And that concludes my lecture. So today I talked about the origins of World War I. Think about those 4 causes. What were the 4 causes that led to World War I? Again, the assassination of Archduke Francis Ferdinand by Gavrilo Princip of the Black Hand was the spark. It was not a cause of World War I. It's simply a spark that combines nationalism, okay? This is Eastern European nationalism, okay? It combines these entangling alliances. Serbia, which supported the Black Hand. Serbians supported the Black Hand, and then you have that alliance with Russia, okay? And then Russia had an alliance with France because they had a common enemy in Germany. And Germany had an alliance with Austria-Hungary because they have a large population of Germanic peoples. So they see themselves as a common race, okay? So this idea of nationalism, social Darwinism is still there. It plays a very large role. Then we talked about professionals and conscription during World War I, and then this movement from optimism to pessimism during the brutality of World War I. Thank you.